Andrade El Idolo is all elite. Plus, is WWE getting ready to be sold? We talk about it next on the Squared Circle Psychobabble. My name is Michael Valenti. Joining me is Ralph Valenti. Ralph, El Idolo, Andrade has officially joined All Elite Wrestling after appearing on AEW Dynamite this past Friday. Got a pretty decent promo, one I'm actually happy with because it didn't take jabs at WWE, and he's on his focus here with AEW. Looks like he's joining with Vicky Guerrero. What were your thoughts on Andrade officially becoming part of All Elite Wrestling?
Well, for starters, of course, I think just like a majority of wrestling fans, I'm excited. Some potential dream matches that he can have there, some really good matchups for him. Him going to another promotion that is not only prominent but successful keeps him in the spotlight, so to speak. So
Yes.
he's one of those guys that certainly falls into the category of wrestling fan. I'd imagine that is going to say that certainly underutilized. And that's just based on his in-ring talent. You kind of pointed out that his promo was fine. I agree. I didn't have any issue with his promo. And I know a lot of people have speculated that the thing that really held him back on the main roster for WWE was the fact that he wasn't necessarily as fluent in English as maybe some people would want him to be.
Right.
Whether that's true or not, I mean, I guess we can only speculate at this point. Last night, it was fine what he did. We had Vicky Guerrero there who was introducing him. And the thing that's going to make him stand out is really just his ability to work in the ring. If anybody has paid attention to him, and if you haven't, you should certainly check him out. He's had some classic all-time great matches in NXT. Some of which, like if you were to go back and watch them, when all said and done with NXT, whenever that may be, people are going to look back on some of his matches and say those were some of the very best. So definitely exciting news. I'm excited to see what happens with him, and I'm excited to see him in a prominent promotion like AEW.
Right. And what do you think? You know, he's trying to say he's going to be the face of All Elite Wrestling. You talk about dream matches. One of them, I think a lot of people would love to see, and they're going to see not in AEW, but in AAA for that mega championship is with Kenny Omega. Do you think they start him straight out in a storyline where they actually bring that feud into AEW to help promote both AEW and AAA?
I think they probably should. Because I think one of the things that bothers me most sometimes about pro wrestling, and this is probably more specifically for WWE, when guys get called up from NXT, a lot of times WWE likes to pretend like NXT almost didn't exist. Like that's not a part of their history. That's not a part of who they are. It never happened. So why even acknowledge it? These things and these types of matches, you're talking about Omega and Andrade. It's going to happen. It's going to be for a title that they've talked about previously on AEW. So let's not pretend that it's not going to happen. These guys are on the same show. He's in All Elite Wrestling now. Kenny's in All Elite Wrestling now. They have to at least acknowledge that. I think they should at least.
Are there other dream matches that you want to see Andrade have in All Elite Wrestling now that he's officially there?
Yeah, I mean, there's a handful of them. I mean, of course, him and Omega. I'm looking forward to that. Him and you know what, for somebody who's another former WWE guy, him and Christian, I think would make for a very good match. Because Christian works a more traditional style, I guess you could say. I think that probably him and Darby Allin is a match I would love to see. I would love to see him work with a bigger guy, maybe somebody like Lance Archer. There's a whole host of matches that I'm excited to see. Off the top of my head, those would be the ones that I would say. Definitely the one with Darby Allin.
Out of those, I mean, I would love to see any of those. Those would all be great matches, but obviously being a luchador himself, one of the biggest stars to come out of Mexico, you think, you know, the Lucha Brothers and Rey Fenix and Penta having matches there on AEW. Yeah. I'm sure they've had them around the world before. Having that on a national stage would be a great match to have together.
Or even Pac. That would be an amazing match too.
Yes, it would. That would be a really good match. I would like to see, you know, Hangman Page would be a good match. I think he could have so many guys on this roster he can have amazing matches with, and maybe he'll finally see that full potential that WWE just did not let him have for whatever reason, or whatever the reason may be, whether it was a language barrier that Vince thought he had, or he just didn't connect with the audience, whatever the reason may be, he's going to have that opportunity. Now,
Right. And I think that it's, sorry, not to cut you off, but really quick, one more point I just want to make with this. It's interesting because a lot of people always say, and ourselves included, we always say, well, they can't sign everybody and they shouldn't sign all the former WWE talent.
right.
But it's smart for them to go out there and get talent like this that the fans, especially the hardcore fans, can look at and say, he's going to go to AEW and he's going to get an opportunity because he was underutilized in WWE. We've already seen them do that. I guess you could say Miro. Obviously, Miro had his ups and downs at the beginning of his run, but right now he's on the right track.
Yep.
Christian, who knows what's going to happen with him? Andrade now. So these guys that have gone from the WWE, Moxley's probably the best example of this.
Yep.
From the WWE to AEW, they're at least going to get an opportunity, and that works because it goes hand in hand with what the fans want to see. Because when you look at WWE and you look at NXT, those guys got opportunities in NXT. When they came to the main roster, they didn't. So a guy like Andrade fits in perfectly for what the fans want to see, I think.
Now, I don't know if you saw this bit of news, but Wrestling Inc. reported this. Now, Tony Khan and Andrade were in talks of Andrade joining AEW since his release. Now, he didn't have the 90-day no-compete clause, so he could have signed and gone on that following Wednesday on Dynamite. But in the report, there were talks where Andrade wanted creative control and like control of how his finishes were. Kind of like Hogan-esque. Do you think Andrade is really the guy to ask for stuff like this?
I think I don't really necessarily have an issue with him asking for some creative control. Now, what that actually means, I don't know. But let's think about this for a second. He just came from a company where I'm going to assume he had little to no creative control. He was hardly utilized. So, why would you not want to try and ask for a little bit of control of your career? If you think you know what you bring to the table and what's going to bring you success in pro wrestling, why not ask for some creative control? Whether that means he can say yes or no. I know Hogan was always criticized for that during his run in WCW. I don't think he should have the ability to say whether he loses or wins a match, or to say he won't work a match if he doesn't want to lose to whoever it may be. That's up to Tony Khan. I'd imagine he should be the guy that makes those decisions, not the talent.
Right. And I agree there. And I think it's interesting. Like Andrade, like you talk about the people that had creative control. Hogan, Bret Hart, when he was in WWE, had creative control for the last 60 days of his contract. So that was part of why this Montreal screw job happened. And, stuff like that. So I understand where he's coming from. He doesn't want to look stupid or look buried, but at the same time, it's a little interesting that he's asking for it, considering he hasn't been on TV for such a long time. Like, who the hell do you think you are? This is like terms Hogan asked for. These are terms Bret Hart asked for. Are you on that level? I don't think so, but maybe we're wrong. But Ralph, let's talk about the other big news that happened in the world of professional wrestling this past week. And that was some pretty big releases happening. Braun Strowman, Aleister Black, Ruby Riott, Lana, and Buddy Murphy. Also Santana Garrett thrown in there. WWE, a lot of people are starting to speculate this is a fire sale to sell WWE. Are you on the WWE is for sale bandwagon?
I keep going back and forth. I honestly do. I mean, there's a lot of things we have to take into consideration. The cuts, obviously, is one thing. The Peacock deal, which was huge because, that's additional revenue. And if you're somebody who's looking from the outside in, you're saying, okay, they're going to try to increase profitability. They're trying to make it look as profitable and as appetizing as possible so they can sell it for as much as possible. And on top of that, Vince McMahon is old. I mean, there's no way you can deny that.
Right.
Not even saying like, how long does he have left, but like, how long does he realistically want to work in pro wrestling? Like I understand this is his company, he takes a lot of pride in it and all that type of stuff. But, at some point, does he just say, you know what, enough's enough. I don't want to do this anymore. And if no one else in the family wants to take over the company, then maybe they are looking to sell.
Right. Now, I understand why people are quick to assume that this is the start of a sale for WWE. obviously budget cuts. They're trying to make their profits look good for whoever the buyer is going to be. But I'm actually going to think of a different approach here with this. Obviously, a sale is possible, but last August we had Nick Khan join WWE as what I think he's the president or whatever he is, and now he's part of the board of directors. He's a huge part of WWE, and since then there have been some really big changes, and possibly changes that you never think would happen in WWE, and things that they're doing that you never thought WWE would ever do. They sold the rights to the WWE network to Peacock. They're releasing wrestlers more than they're signing wrestlers. They allowed a guy from the top competition to be on a show on the WWE network. Like, these are not things you think WWE is
trying
doing.
To work with New Japan.
Trying to work with New Japan, trying to work with MLW, having Jericho on the Broken Skull sessions. What I think this is setting up for life after Vince McMahon in WWE, and this is a rebuilding of WWE. And Nick Khan, before he became part of WWE, he was an agent for broadcasters in sports and has been with sports almost his entire career before becoming part of WWE. So with that said, I think this is him being a GM when they are hired for a sports franchise. Get rid of the bad contracts, cut down on, whatever, and let's rebuild this thing. And the reason I think it's also supported that this is the direction they're going is because we learned from Fightful Select that Bruce Pritchard and John Laurinaitis, as well as other higher-ups in WWE, were in NXT this week looking at potential call-ups. And there was also Pro Wrestling Unlimited that were reporting that Nick Khan has put in this new etiquette where if your contract is too big, you're going to get cut. Just like you see in the NFL, just like you see in the MLB, just like you see in the NBA. If their contracts are too big, you're either getting released or traded. That's where they're going. I think that's the direction they're going with WWE. Not necessarily a sale, but rebuilding.
Yeah, and I think from like a business standpoint, like that's what you want to see out of your talent. Like if they're going to pay you some of the largest contracts, like they want to see a return on their investment. They want to see merchandise being pushed. They want to see you as one of the top guys that people are going to buy into. Now, the one area where I think they kind of contradict themselves is this. I guess you could use Braun Strowman as a example. Let's assume they released him because his contract was too big and, they felt like they weren't getting enough out of him. Well, you have to remember this is different than professional sports in the sense that it is scripted. You're in control of a good majority of what happens. At least you're in control of the scenarios that the individuals are put in. So if you're going to have Braun Strowman go out on Monday Night Raw dressed as Buddy the Elf and make him look like a goof, what do you really expect out of him? And the other thing that I would say about that mentality is, if you feel like you're overpaying for people or you're not quite utilizing people, nobody wants to see anybody lose their job. But the good thing about having other prominent companies in wrestling right now, like AEW, or you want to say like Ring of Honor, Impact is having a sudden kind of small resurgence. There's places for people to go. So even if they're not working in the WWE, at least they can land on their feet in another rival company. The one area where I think there's a little contradiction is if they're saying they're looking to the future. So are you saying that in Aleister Black or Andrade, you don't see them as being guys that can carry the torch for the future of WWE? Like, are they on, like, what is the end game? What is the goal of, are they trying to find the next big superstar? Is that what they're looking at? They're saying, well, Andrade or Aleister Black, they're great guys. They're good wrestlers, but they're not that superstar that we're looking for. They're not the Cenas. They're not the Rocks. They're not the Austins. So,
well, that's what Booker T thinks of Aleister Black. He's a great worker, but couldn't, set himself apart from the rest of the roster. And that's why he was released.
He was never given the opportunity to. I think Aleister Black has one of the most unique gimmicks. I mean, granted, yes, it's like, I guess you can compare it to something like The Undertaker or something like that. But his entrance, the aura, his ability to work in the ring. Look, at the end of the day, I understand they want this to be sports entertainment. Really, I get it. And I understand them wanting to try to find the next big guy or the next big star. But to say like to just kind of disservice the fan and say, okay, we're sports entertainment. We're not going to be pro wrestling. Like Aleister Black is a really good professional wrestler. Andrade is really good professional wrestler.
Mm-hmm.
Ricochet, who's still under contract, like you can't find anything for those guys to do, even if they're not going to be the next big thing. They can't be good utility players, guys that go out there, work their ass off, have great matches. So even like a hardcore fan who doesn't even like WWE can say, okay, well, at least I'll watch Aleister Black against Andrade. But I don't get that mentality.
Let's think about this too. Brandon Thurston of WrestleNomics tweeted this whole theory out, which I kind of agree with. But part of his theory, or not really theory, but part of the way he was supporting his theory was the fact that there were 300 signed wrestlers in WWE. 300. And only 78 were used on one of their in-ring shows. That's less than a third. That's almost a sixth. Or that's more than just about more than a sixth. One roll of the dice, you'll get someone that's on TV. They have to cut it. They have to cut the roster. And people have been saying this for years. Does that mean a guy like Aleister Black has to get cut? Unfortunately, yes. Does that mean a guy like Andrade gets cut? Yes. Braun Strowman, his contract was too high. And the guy, like, this is a prime example with Braun Strowman, his contract. This is a guy who I felt like if they pulled the trigger on him when they should have, after he flipped that ambulance over with Roman Reigns, and they have him beat Brock, that was your next big megastar. And they missed the boat on that. Now he's doing choo-choo around the ring. He's, like, he was he was a mix of a comedy gimmick and too serious. Like, they couldn't quite get it right. And he was becoming like the Big Show where he was turning every other week. They ruined him. And he's that big man and the upper mid card who has main event potential. You're paying him $1 million a year. There's another guy that's probably making half that, waiting in the wings for whatever reason he hasn't been on TV. I'm sure he's going to speak on this in a little while. I know he tweeted something out this week. That's Keith Lee. So if Nick Khan's out there saying, if you're not living out to your contract or your contract's too big, we need to cut you, that makes a whole lot of sense, because why pay Braun $1 million when you got Keith Lee making $500,000 in the same role for Raw?
Yeah, no, I definitely think that Raw or just WWE in general has far too many people under contract. I mean, I know that they went on this spree of giving guys an extension because I'd imagine there was some sort of pressure from AEW or the fear that guys would go to AEW. And what's the point of having all of that talent if you can't utilize it? And it's not even you don't want to utilize it, you can't. I just question, why certain guys like an Aleister Black or Andrade, like you can't find anything for them.
It's not just creative though. It could have just been contract. Maybe Aleister Black was making too much, or he's there too long with his contract, and not for nothing, that puts a stranglehold on NXT, which is supposed to be the developmental brand. And you have guys that are still there in the main event scene for 5 years now and not getting called up. Part of that is because they don't want to.
Some of them don't want to.
I know that. And if that's the case, I'm sorry. That's the next person I cut next. If you're not wanting to go to the main roster and you're putting a stranglehold on NXT and other people going to the main roster, or those on the main roster have to drown because they're not ready, I'm sorry. They got to get cut too. And they'll find work in AEW. They'll find work in New Japan. They could work full-time in the Indies. They don't need to be in NXT. But yet they're still there.
So what do you think the end game is? Do you think they're going to call up the upper echelon of the NXT right now?
They have to
call Adam Cole, Karrion Kross, Johnny Gargano, Ciampa.
Karrion Kross needs to stay there a little bit longer to work on his character. Have him run with the NXT Championship for a while. But Johnny Gargano, you've been there way too long. Tommaso Ciampa, you've been there way too long. Adam Cole, you've been there too long. There's nothing left for you to do in NXT. You're wasting.
What about Finn Balor?
Balor can be like that like aging vet that helps like the young rookie, like where you have the backup quarterback, like a Josh McCown role, where he's helping out Sam Darnold or whoever the rookie quarterback is for whatever team he is. That's what Finn Balor could play that role. Guys like Johnny Gargano or Tommaso Ciampa or Adam Cole, that's not a role for them. So you can have Finn Balor go to NXT and stay there because he can also be a coach there and teach these guys. So it's not as bad. But Gargano, Adam Cole, Tommaso Ciampa, I'd send them up. I think the women's division, whether you want to have this tag team division or not, you need to send some of those women back up. I send back up Ember. I send up Shotzi Blackheart. Raquel, once she drops the title, I'd send her up. They need to put more women on SmackDown, I think. I think it was the right move to have Laurinaitis and Pritchard go down and see who can be called up right now. I bring up Dexter Lumis. I bring up LA Knight and Cameron Grimes too. What is there left to do in NXT? You're not going to give a NXT title run to Cameron Grimes. His character doesn't fit it. His character's ready for Raw or SmackDown. LA Knight's ready for Raw or SmackDown. Hell, Frankie Monet doesn't really need to be in NXT. A couple weeks on TV just to get the WWE way, but she could get called up too.
It's certainly possible. I mean, that's the thing that's tough with trying to predict what's going to happen with WWE, because I feel like they're either making these cuts to make room to call a bunch of people up, or maybe they're positioning themselves for a sale.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think they're both possible. They're definitely both possible here. And I'm sure the comment sections are going to be letting us know where they lie in. It's definitely a sale or it's a rebuilding process. But I think you could say easily Raw and NXT are stale with their talent right now. Absolutely stale. They need to shake things up. You need some NXT guys to help, freshen things up on Raw. And you need some of these guys that have been in the PC working to be on NXT, because it's the same thing over and over and over again on both those shows.
Agreed. Yes.
Yeah. All right. So let us know what you guys think of where this is going with WWE. Let us know some of your dream matches for Andrade and AEW. Don't forget to share us all over social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, SCPB Podcast. Subscribe, hit that bell for notifications, and we'll see you on the next episode of the Squared Circle Psychobabble.